Okay. So hi everybody, we're here with Peter and we're going to be talking about Peter's experience. He called me last June after an article was in the paper and he asked me if I had ever considered having patients that have stage 4 cancer or end of life patients to be volunteers or advocates for other patients. And I thought that is a fantastic, I had not, and I thought that was just a fantastic thing to think about, because nobody can obviously help others like somebody who's walking in the shoes that others are. So Peter and I became fast friends and got together, and today we're going to be doing an interview on what it's like to be an end-of-life patient. So I'd like to introduce Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hi, you.
And the first question that I want to ask is, do you remember exactly when you got diagnosed, when it was, and what did they tell you?
Well, it was after about a week at Sharon Hospital, after I had spent a month with some very severe urinary incontinent problems, and I was there for about 4 days getting tests. Never heard a word what they were doing. I didn't. And honestly, at that point, I was so out of it, and plus they were giving me lots of meds, and so had all these scans and stuff, and nobody said, well, here's what we're looking for, because maybe because they didn't know. But then as I've mentioned before to you, a bunch of white coats came into my room and said, boom, you have prostate cancer, we found it in your bones, it's metastasized, stage 4, it's in your liver, that's it. And the only thing we can do is suggest a once-a-month shot of Lupron, which seems to be fairly effective in, giving people literally, years, ideally, or whatever, extra time.
But at the time, what did they say that your prognosis was at that point?
Oh, they said it was over. At that point, they were talking 2 weeks, 4 weeks.
So you had literally not been ill and then had some symptoms, went into the hospital and found out you have stage 4, which was also in your bones and your liver.
That it had just,
Wow.
that I had just been, walking around or basically sitting upstairs watching TV and being depressed, just walking around without any idea that anything was wrong, until, of course, it was just going to the point where, it was just everything just, started misworking and shutting down. So it was somewhat surprising.
Sure, to say the least.
It was. I think I was almost I didn't. It wasn't like I flipped out and I tore my IV out or anything. I was just sort of like, what?
In a shock
Yeah,
state.
I was like, what are they saying? And then I think it was when my son came, and we sat here one afternoon. He was in tears. He was very upset, and I guess he sensed that I wasn't really cognizant of what was going on to the extreme that it was, because he looked at me and said, you're not going to get better. He said, because at that point he was working on the assumption that I had, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. So he broke out in tears and he said, you do know that you're not going to get better. And I said, oh, I see what you're saying.
So you had not really grasped that
concept? I hadn't really grasped it. Yeah, I did. It was just sort of
wow. So your son has to tell you that.
Yeah,
that has to be heavy on everybody.
He knew that I was like, laughing it up as best I could, and they upped my Oxycontin considerably so that I stopped having the serious discomfort, and it was not thinking back, and I really have never thought about this until you asked about it, but I really didn't. I knew that I was sick, and everybody around me was like sort of like a funereal kind of an atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I was just, and then he, when he said that, I said, oh, and it was a very, it was a tough thing for him to say.
Sure.
But he was very astutely aware that I was not really understanding that, at that point, that if what they had said had come to pass, that I had come to pass, that, he was, he was here for a few days and he had to go back to work to San Francisco. So it was like, goodbyes and, it was
oh my goodness.
Well, so it was, it was getting the first drift of it was, but, and then again, when I went, like as I said, I went down to Calvary Hospice, and, it was just, getting in a real bed, sleeping with clean sheets. All these things just started to, I started to, think, wow, this is like, I'm so comfortable.
So
But
let's explain to people.
yeah,
So this was in November, the end of November
that's right.
2012, that you got this diagnosis.
Right.
And with a couple of weeks of your prognosis to live, you were then sent to Calvary, which
Right.
is a hospice place. It's supposed to be absolutely wonderful, but
Right.
people there
Right.
are
Right.
going there to die.
Very well.
They're not getting
Right.
out.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and they take really good care of you. And so you went there.
Right.
And what happened?
Well, the only thing, I went in with a very high PSA, which it's not relevant, but it's a number they measure your prostate cancer situation with, the growth of your prostate. I went in with a very high number, and they started giving me the Lupron, and the 100 was high. They finally, after about 3.5 months of just getting the Lupron, nothing else, no treatment, no doctors ever saw me. They took my blood once a week. They came in and said that I had this wonderful little Chinese doctor, the woman, she came in and she said, "Oh, good news." She said, "PSA 19.
Yeah.
She said, "You know what?
Wow.
You go home. You leave." And at that point, of course, as anybody's found being in the
Wow.
hospital, whether, it's for this or that or something more serious, you hate to leave. You go, "Oh my God, oh my God, I've been taken care of for so long." But then as soon as I got out, first thing I did, I said, "Oh, I need a cigarette." And I started to feel better about, not being there. But it was, the whole thing was...
One of the things that was so interesting that struck me is you were talking about how you had roommates at the time, and you would watch them come and go, and they would come in and they would pass, and their families would be there, and there you are, not getting sicker or getting better.
Getting better. It was great. It was
that is very atypical for that situation. And then eventually you had to leave.
Right. It was very odd that, I wanted to, like I mentioned earlier, they made you go, once you left your room, you had to have an attendant with you. And, I just wanted to go walk around the halls. And I said, "Where's the library?" They said, "Well, we've got to get somebody to, make an appointment to go down there with you." And so, the rooms were just, because the people that were really on their way out, some of them had big families, and there were people arguing about, we should do this. I mean, it just went on night and day. Just night and day that, that people just came and went. And when I finally, they discharged me, and my brother and my nephew came to pick me up, all the staff that were there were clapping, and, it was just such an unusual moment for them, because I had been there for so long that I'd gotten very close with, a lot of the nurses and the techs, the helpers, that they were just ecstatic that I'd left, and I said, "I just need a cigarette. Let me get out of here." And it was a very odd situation,
which is wonderful. I mean, you were gifted with this wonderful thing called time.
Yeah, to walk out of there, right.
So when you had all this time to think, what was your strength during a time that can probably be the most challenging for people giving a diagnosis like that? What happened? Did you start getting more into faith or reading? You said,
yeah. I think it started. It started with the little things about. I think my ex used to joke when I was cleaning the house, and she'd say, "Oh, you're so anal about the cleaning," and I'd say, "You want to do it?" And then she'd say, "No, I was just joking."
Yeah.
So I used to love to clean. My hygiene was good. So I think it was just the little things. I think it was them, shaving me and getting me down to get a haircut, and then somebody threw the New York Times on my bed one morning, and I started reading it cover to cover, and I started reading, and then, as I mentioned, I read a couple of my Zen books, and I thought, my ex had been telling me this for years through our divorce, saying, it's over, move on, the moment's gone, and so I guess I just started feeling so much better about, because it had been literally way before I started feeling any kind of symptoms, that I just was unhappy with every decision or situation that I found myself in. So I guess it was interestingly just the small things that started to all come together, that I was reading, and I'm keeping myself really clean and going to get a haircut every 2 weeks, and then it was just it's sort of hard to say it was this there wasn't a moment, but again, I just realized that it was, that there was there was time, and you either waste it or you make use of it. And
Sure.
I think it really, but primarily, I think it was just that I started to do the things that, that used to be, that there was really the me that wasn't, hammered,
Hmm.
or doing something stupid, or I got a DWE, just all the things that you could just sit around and I have enough stuff, and that somebody could they could you could have a yard sale of regrets, and put them all
Yeah.
out on the front lawn, but I don't regret them, so they're gone. But it was just, I think it really was just had a lot to do with just feeling more like myself. And then I just started to think, well, this is like great feeling like this, so why don't I just keep doing it?
Right.
And
Yeah.
then
Hmm.
I got my computer, and I started studying things, and all the things that used to give me pleasure that I hadn't. Maybe it had been 10 years since I had really gotten any satisfaction from anything that really sort
Wow.
of was the real me. So I think that was really it. I think I started to realize, by the necessity of being there. They used to have a smoking porch, but they eliminated that. When the city made everything smoke-free zone, so I wasn't smoking. So it was just, that sort of, I just saw it as like, boy, this could be like a whole clean slate.
Sure.
But again, I'm there the whole time. I wasn't like thinking, after 2 weeks, I wasn't going, oh boy, I'm not going to die. 2 weeks are up. So I never really had that feeling that,
Right.
they made a mistake or something like that. So, when they discharged me and I came back up here to Millerton, and I had been living here for years. I never walked it. All of a sudden, I said, oh, Millerton, oh, Drillerton, it sucks. Everything
Mm.
sucked, but it was in my head. So I started to realize how lucky I was to this beautiful place to be living in.
Hmm.
And how every little, like, this thing was a couple little kids next door. I got to be good friends with them. They started giving me paintings, and
That's so
I said,
cute.
let's have an art show.
That is
So
so
I
cute.
put up, I printed the library the headers up, and I brought the
Wow.
bunch of their
I love
family.
that.
I got some Chips and Sunny D, and we had like a little art opening. And then I realized, well, I really like this stuff. I'm just going to leave it here. So it was just, all these things just
I
started.
was wondering about that stuff. It looks great.
Yeah, it was just, but I just realized that doing the right things,
Yeah.
and for yourself and for other people, it was such a wondrous feeling.
So it's almost like a gift
Yeah.
that you had this wake up call and you really are atypical for the diagnosis and for your illness to just be having this extended period of life. Because
Right,
November
and
2012, you
it's
had a
almost
couple of weeks,
yeah,
and
it's
now we're
almost a
at
year.
November
Yeah, we're just
5th.
right. We're
Yeah.
just about a year from the whole thing. So,
Wow.
first of all, the
Wow.
oncologist over at Sharon, the doctors there own the hospital, which is sort of a rare situation. And the oncologist, I guess, was one of the officers, and he kept coming up to my room every day, and he said, "So when are you going to leave?" He said, "You can't stay here forever." And I'm going, "Oh my God, because I thought I'd be coming back up to this little terrible attic room, but like I said, my son and my nephew, my brother and my nephew fixed this all up. There was, this was sort of a little dining room, and they brought all the stuff, got me the
Sure.
TV, got me the
Yep.
computer. So, I just, all of a sudden, it's really in your head when you're miserable. I mean, you could. You could have a terrible boss, and going to work is horrible. So,
Hmm.
if you don't like it enough, you get another job or something. But
Sure.
I just started to realize that, God, everything can be like either miserable or it can be so much fun.
Well,
Like when,
this, yeah.
like for me, when my kidney bag stopped filling up and I started urinating
Mm.
normally, I still have to sit down. I said, well, that's what the Lupron did. Now I'm at first I went through this whole, it ended finally, but I went through the whole menopausal thing with the night sweats and everything.
Yeah.
So now I go, and now they got me peeing like a lady, which actually I
Oh.
enjoy. I said, women got things that they're not telling us, because it's peeing sitting down is much more pleasant than standing up. So for me, it's like, the bag stopped there. I don't have to deal with them anymore for now, and so rather than go, I go, oh, that was fantastic.
Well, one of the things that struck me about you, I think it was maybe their second time that we've gotten together, is that you just explained how, and it was the summertime and it's so beautiful here, how you feel so lucky, how you are walking down the street and you're so present in the moment and you're watching people that are rushing here and rushing there and missing out on this moment.
Right.
And that's what the gift
Right. Like somebody could be, sitting at their, in November at their son's basketball game up at the Weavertuck School. And, they're sitting there and the kid says, well, my dad's here, I'm going to play my heart out tonight. And the guy could be sitting there on the cell phone going, oh, no, that's not the estimate I gave you.
Right. And it happens all the time.
Right. And people feel it's a necessity. They say, well, I would have loved to focus on the game, but, who's going to pay for this? Who's going to do it? People, and people can always find excuses for, just kind of plodding along, I would have loved to have that wonderful evening, but I had to, do this or do that.
Well, we think that it's going to go on forever. I mean, especially nobody really talks about death or end of life so much. And we're all, we talked about this. It's not just you. You happen to be in a position that it's more prominent, relevant. But each one of us is going to face that. And the more you're aware of how finite life is how valuable
Which I think is what is the gift that you certainly give to a lot of people, and the ones that don't take it in, that's their loss. But it really, it's just it's just a matter of once you start to enjoy moments, you just you never want to go back. And I don't think that everybody somebody who they live check to check and everything else. It's really no excuse to live a mundane or a pseudo miserable lifestyle.
Right.
You just you pay what you pay, and then you sit down with your kids and you play Legos on the floor and you have a great time doing it.
Right.
So it's just I think people just, and like you say, people think they're going to live forever. I got to work, so what happens when I'm 100? I hear they're gonna Google's gonna have people living to 150, and and then that's all people think about. Oh my God, you can live till you're 200.
But if you're miserable, what's the point?
Exactly. Yeah. I'd rather just live until I didn't and be as happy as a clam. So
that's wonderful.
That's and I think you make such an effort to, and I think it's very commendable that you make such an effort to help people get to that point. With
I mean, I really appreciate that, and it's so interesting how we don't talk about it, but yet we're all going to experience it, and how much of a major difference there can be when you are aware that our lives will end. You live them in a different way with that awareness in the moment, but people like yourself who are willing to open up and kind of share what they feel inside at this stage.
Well, it's not,
that it's not, because we're scared. We're so scared of death.
Yeah, it's like, but it doesn't, the fact that, I could talk to somebody and say, oh, well, they'll say, oh, well, this guy knows what he's talking about because he's also terminal. But it's all, it's a meld. Somebody like you, takes the message out and tries to explain that to people, so that when they, let's say somebody does all of a sudden find out some bad news, they have a foundation to work with. It's more
like a natural extension.
They have a foundation to work with, because you've, I don't think you have to, your experiences are certainly as relevant, pertinent, and valuable as, anybody else's, because you've been doing this in so many different capacities. And so I think that it's just, everybody does what they can, and and I think if you help somebody, it like I said, it comes back and helps you. But you do it to help. If anybody feels better from something you do, then you just go. Like I said, I talked to the housemate a couple of times. He said, I actually feel a little better about the whole thing, and I said,
isn't that wonderful?
I said, I didn't say it to him, but I thought to myself, that's it.
Right.
That's all I care about,
That's great.
And somebody who drinks a lot, who I'm sort of friends with, I talk to them about alcohol is his drinking problem. And I say to them, look, I'm not being judgmental. And I'm not like one of those people that, some people can't go places where people are drinking. People
Mm-hmm.
will say, "Oh, do you mind if I drink?" But
Mm-hmm.
so I'm able to talk to them and say, "Look, you screwed up. I was walking down the street with you Saturday at noon, and you're hammered."
Yeah,
You
let's
know,
talk about that. I've dealt with so many people at the end of life, and one of the things we really talk about is if there are any regrets
right?
and forgiveness. And you and I have talked about
Yeah,
this, that forgiving ourselves is one
right.
of the hardest things, that
Brutal.
brutal
It's a
and
task. It is a
and the
real
most
right,
important thing to be able to do.
right,
Well,
right,
we've also talked about how this whole life's journey is full of challenges that we're to experience and not be judgmental on ourselves.
right.
So what would you say at the end when you're given a diagnosis that you're terminal? Do you reflect and do you try and make amends with situations that you...
Well, for example, my ex did a lot of favors for me over the winter, paperwork wise. She literally single handedly got me
And that's not
my
how it always
my son.
was.
No, no, no. I mean, it was the worst because not only was it a divorce, but I throw in the alcoholism
Right.
and her anger towards me, and it was just a
Sure.
mix made in hell. But um, uh, she did, she single handedly. I got out of the hospice. I got back here, and Social Security checks started coming, and so she does stained glass. So I spent about a month getting all the glossies, making a list of all the galleries. Militant, I would go in. Other ones I'd call and then email, and I tried to get some of her stained glass placed in a gallery. So I went from this totally and then I
Wow.
write her, and she never writes back. She's still angry. She still has some
But you
anger.
did say she forgave you when
Yeah,
she was
she
in the
did. No, she
hospital
does.
for
Right, but
that.
she
Yeah.
put it in a point where that's it.
But
But
you feel good
yeah,
about...
but
Mhm.
I every time I called the gallery and I said, would you look at her website? And I'd say that was great. I'm glad they could write back and say, no, we're not
Mhm.
interested. We don't really understand the glass in the window. But so yeah, so it was like you can, first of all, you like you said, you forgive yourself, but there are things you can do.
Mhm.
Like somebody that maybe threw a bad turn to. You say, hey, like I did with her. I said, well, look, she did me this wonderful paperwork favor, which, really
Mhm.
saved my life having those checks come. And I said, what can I do for her? And I said,
Isn't that
I'm not going
nice?
to call her. I'm not, there's nothing I'm going to say to her. So I just started doing the gallery thing, and I wrote her, and I rarely hear back from her. I did send her a little copy of the Bhagavad Gita that I bought at the Oblong bookstore, which
Mhm.
she actually wrote back and said, I had seen this book. I had read the Bhagavad Gita, but I'd never seen this translation. It's really interesting. Thank you. So,
That's very
and I
nice.
said, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like you
Yep.
got to know when to stop.
Sure.
And because the normally that out of the moment thing would be, oh, I'll write her again. I'll say
Right,
something else,
right.
and all
But
of a sudden it's like pew.
yeah.
So it is. There are always ways to, if you. I don't think you want to say like, oh, I got to make up for that. But if you did something to somebody or you caused them a little discomfort or some agony, you think of something you can do for them and you do it and you feel much better.
Or at least forgive yourself that
Right,
you were in a
exactly. If
place
there's
that you
nothing you
weren't
can do,
present.
right? If
Right.
there's
That you
nothing you
didn't
can
mean
do,
it.
you just say,
Mhm.
look, that was then. This is now.
Something you said before was wonderful about how you would not trade places in a million years for if somebody said you can have live till you're 97 but not be present and be drinking and
Right,
and doing the things
nasty and
right.
right, right,
Or you can be in the place that you have a limited time
right.
and you could be so present that you are now, and you said...
Right. I said I would I mean I would answer that faster than the question would be finished. I would definitely take the situation I'm in now.
That you're very, very
There's no doubt.
content
Yeah.
with how
That
you're living your
I'm
days,
so
and
happy,
yeah,
and things just it's
beautiful.
not like it levels off. It's like I find something new at the supermarket. I ran out of cleaner.
Mm.
And I kept thinking, oh, look, it's $4, because I try and really watch my budget.
Yeah.
So today I thought, well, how can you clean if you don't have a cleaner? So I went and bought a bottle of scrubbing bubbles, and I came back and I go, oh boy, am I going to clean this evening? So I know once I take my evening meds and I sort of chill for the evening, I said I'm going to get that sprayer out. I washed all my rags, and so it's those kind of things where it's just
Yeah.
just the what most people would just, oh, I got to go to the store or get some cleaner. I was like, oh boy, I got to look at this.
So you're so appreciative of all the simple little
Of
things
everything,
and
right?
of
Right.
everything in the day.
Do a little. I do all my washing by hand, and when all my laundry's done, I think, well, that's that. Everything's clean, and so it's just every little thing can be, it can just pass by, or it can be like a real pleasurable thing.
What would you
Yeah.
say to somebody who is newly diagnosed with a terminal illness?
I would say of course, it's a very tough thing to, like in my situation where I just really didn't even know what was going on. But it's very tough. But I think that in the situation, if I could have if I could have if I knew then what I know now, the first thing I would do would have been to, especially if I didn't have all that valuable time at the hospice, I would start looking for people like yourself who would be able to. It's almost like going to school. It's like, you want to be, a math teacher. You can't just go walk into Weaver Tuck one day and say, I want to be a math teacher. You got to learn math. And then you could become, Einstein. But you got to learn it first. So I think for a lot of people, the best thing is to find somebody, again, exactly like yourself. And for people in this area, yourself, that starts to teach you how to, it's almost like somebody teaching you how to walk again after you've been in a car accident or something. It's therapy. It's therapy. I mean, you're an end of life therapist, and so I think that's what I would recommend for most people to not just try and, because you're not going to get. Oh, I was thinking earlier. I don't know if I've got your book, but I also have that article about talking to kids about death. I don't know if you ever.
I
found
did. It was wonderful.
Okay, but what got me was the person writing the article or somebody interviewed, when he was a kid or she was a kid, the parents. I think it was a girl. Her favorite person was her grandmother, and the grandmother dies, and the parents didn't talk about it and didn't take her to the funeral.
Right. And
she said, or he, whoever said, it took him or her years to get over that.
Correct.
She became so in a moment's terrible decision. Her parents really. Put her in a position where she had something that she had to work out for years.
Not unlike so many other people, because
I
see it all when it starts to come out.
You just say death, and people just go. I mean, they'd rather hear
all kinds of.
They'd rather hear you're broke.
Right.
The bank's taking your house next week. That they say, all right, honey, it'll work out. We'll get through it. But the minute you mention the word death, people just the doors start closing. Oh, I got to make a phone call. No, you're right. Nobody wants to talk about it.
And it's a natural part of our journey, and we all going to experience that. But when you're saying when we don't handle it correctly with the children, it sets them up with this dysfunctional relationship that comes out later in all kinds of horrible, difficult ways.
Plus, you as a kid, you put the impetus on them at some point when they have kids. They're either going to make the same mistake, or they have to work their emotional butts off to try and get over what the parents taught them.
I think one of the biggest reasons why I got so involved in trying to educate is because of just what you're saying, is that when hopefully an older person would be diagnosed, all the dysfunction of everyone else in the family, that they weren't able to be present with that loved one at the end because they had such dysfunctional relationships with death, and we're going through their own issues, and all of a sudden the person dies, and that's the end of that relationship, and yet there's so much baggage that's still there that doesn't need to be there.
And they make, and that's why I would assume, and again, you would know from experience, but I would assume that a lot of people, the people that get told that they're terminal, they go, oh my God, death? Me? And then the people around them start to act in all different kinds of odd ways. There was somebody, a nice, young lady down at the diner, but it was after we had, I think, our first or second meeting there. And I guess she, realized that, I guess how could you not overhear some of the conversation? So the next time I went in there, she goes to me, hi, Peter, how are you? And I thought, well, look, I'm not challenged, and I'm not deaf.
Right.
That's what I was thinking. I didn't say to her, but you could, people, so you've got the person trying to deal with their own terminality, and then everybody acts in so many different weird ways.
Yes.
Some people will sit around and go, "Oh, is there anything you need?" Oh, and maybe never paid any attention to the person for 30 years.
And some people run away.
And some people run away, right?
Right.
Some people duck out the door, and they afterwards they say, "Geez, I should have gone and seen Grandma." And then they have their own regrets.
Which we don't want, the
right.
regrets, right?
Right. No,
Well,
regret.
I'll tell you that nothing could be like hearing it from somebody who is going through it, and what your strengths are, and just being so candid with, letting us into an insight on what it's like. You are helping so many people by doing that, and I just want to personally thank you for all that you've done for positive passings.
Yes, which just was and to be perfectly honest, every minute was getting first thinking about the lawyers, and then walking past that Hobb and Murphy every day and thinking,
you were a dynamo,
and I'm thinking that would be impossible. I kept thinking that would be impossible.
No,
right across from Cumberland's in Millerton.
Yeah,
and then you do it, and all of a sudden you're thinking, wow. That was great.
Exactly.
But again, I appreciate your compliment in the sense that that if you feel like I'm able to express myself but again, this whole process this afternoon wouldn't be taking place if it wasn't for people like you. So it's not like, oh yeah, the dying guy really got pulled out all the stops. It's all I just look at it like it's just people that do what they do, and again, I could be sitting here watching Cops and having a cup of coffee, and it'd be as happy as a clam, but because of people like you come in, we have this conversation, hopefully there's it's positive material. And if you were to do something with it, whatever, and it made just one person,
yep, that's all it takes.
One person feel better,
yes,
and then the whole world blew up, I would feel better as I was blown out into outer space.
Well, I want to tell
you. If I passed you as we both rocketed towards Jupiter, and you said, "Oh, by the way, that I did this or that with this, and somebody felt better," I'd be going, "Woohoo!"
Well, so I will tell you that.
So it takes like a freight train.
Yes.
You got the engine, and then you got all the cars, and the engine's nothing without the cars, and the cars are nothing without the engine. It's like that's the way life should be. People should say, "I'm a part of the puzzle." And instead of trying to hammer themselves into a space they don't fit into, they should say, "Well, maybe I have to wait a little while. I'm a corner piece. I'll find it."
And we're all doing it together.
Right, exactly.
We're all part of this. So.
Right, exactly. And like you say, the minute you mention death, everybody, it's like the guy. It's like the guys on the Titanic that dressed up as women. It's like every man for himself. I'm getting out of here.
Well, it's fascinating. We're having a conversation about death, and what you're talking about in your whole journey is that you've really learned how to live.
Right.
Finally.
Through right. And like I said earlier, it's an interesting dichotomy.
Yes.
That somebody tells you that well, we're all going to die, but I have an idea that you're gonna hopefully this works out and that works out. But you're on your way, and all of a sudden, you feel so much better. And it doesn't have to be because you had a terrible life before that.
Sure.
You could have the greatest life. That doesn't mean that's not an excuse for you to go, "Oh my God, I lived the greatest life. Now I'm dying. Why was it all worth it? Why nothing matters."
Yeah.
You just you do the same thing that you're telling people. Every time you sit with somebody or you have a meeting or an address, you're telling them. You're saying like, "Look, it's not. It is what it is."
Yeah.
So I think it's I think it really is that everybody has their part to play, and some people play it, and some people just want a new car, and they want their kids to stop yelling so they can watch TV on Friday. And then there's people like you that go out and try and really make people feel better, because that in turn makes the world a better place. I mean, you got one less upset or angry or frustrated person, whether they're walking around or they're laying in bed somewhere. So it's, I think it's...
Well, I think the gift that both of us had from you getting a diagnosis and from me being privileged to work with people is that really being present in the moment is the key to enjoying life. It's not the big house or the cars. Those are great things, but it's being present at that ball game that your child's playing.
Exactly.
And enjoying that moment. And we both are privileged, so we're teaching that to others. So Well, thank you so much, Peter, and I look forward to another interview at some point.
And as long as I'm feeling like I feel now, I would be more than happy to participate in the future.
Well, you are just a treasure, and I adore you. Thank you for doing it.
So that I want to make clear that I would be more than happy to do anything that I'm capable of doing.
Great. Well, just keep doing what you're doing, because it's wonderful.
And the same thing for you.
Thank you.
Right. Because again, if you have 30 people in a room and one person walks out and said, Mom and Dad, they had the wrong idea. And then you've done your thing.
Yep.
Plus,
and it happens. So
I'm sure.
God bless you. Thank you.
The way you address your training and the way that you put it to people, it would be impossible that somebody, at least one person, after talking with you, whether it was one-on-one or an auditorium, wouldn't leave saying, that was the most interesting conversation, and I admit I'm more afraid of dying than anybody, and I'm going to think about it. And but again, I would say, and I think it was really relevant, somebody finds out just gets the bad news. Well, let's say not the pleasant news. In hindsight, after meeting you, my thing would be to look for somebody exactly like you, and I would get somebody to lead. Sometimes there's 5 paths, and you need, there's a little booth, and somebody needs to go. Don't go down that path. That's not the one. You try this path, and then they walk down that path with you a little bit, and explain why that path is the best one, and then they say, "Well, I got to get back to my booth." Go do your thing.
Because there is support out there for people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then they get down the road. Then you're back in your booth. They get down the road. Maybe there's somebody else in another booth. Or maybe you ran around and got to the second booth. And you said, I knew you'd have, you'd need to see me.
Right?
Right. You're racing down in your car, and they're kind of just walking down the path. And they say, oh, what are you doing here? Say, well, I had a feeling you might need me in booth number 2. So I think that in a nutshell for me would be what, and then of course, but people have to, like I said, you can't be following them around, helping them every time they go, oh, Suzanne, I just had the terrible phone.
But we can support each other, right, and be there.
That's right, exactly. And then people they bring themselves up to speed,
right,
and they start to help themselves.
Well, thank you so much for being part of this, and I know that this interview will help so many.
I you know what, honestly, if that would be a dream, but if you're happy with the outcome, that for me alone would be enough.
Thank you, Peter.
So, okay, great.
All right.
That was so.
Aw, thanks for doing that.
Honestly, I'm gonna have the most wonderful evening tonight.
Good.
And I'm gonna, on days like this, I